From in the beginning to the musical apocalypse, this is The Bible Says What. I'm your host, Mike Wiseman. Remember that one time in Isaiah 28 when the loving Christian deity purposefully sent confusing messages to people and then brought them sheer terror? Verse 7 claims that these priests and prophets stagger from beer and are befuddled with wine. They reel from beer. They stagger when they see visions. They stumble when rendering decisions. All the tables are covered with vomit, and there is not a spot without filth. By verse 9, these men were complaining about the rules and demands from God. Maybe the Christian deity could leave them alone and practice some of that free will that Christians are always talking about. Or he could lash out irrationally. Verse 11, not only does the loving Christian deity decide to speak to these people only using foreign lips and strange tongues, removing their ability to hear and understand his words, but he will also remove his protection from them. He is doing all of this so that they will, verse 13, fall backward. They will be injured and snared and captured. Why would anyone want to worship such a monster? Let's start the show.
Is there anything in the Bible that you yourself have an issue with? Okay, so it took you reading the Bible to realize that those things were bad for you?
Yeah, it actually did. I
didn't figure this out on your own?
No, Ted Bundy could be redeemed. God doesn't kill children.
What do you think the Passover was? Yahweh sets up a whole system in the Old Testament where you slaughter animals just so he's able to forgive you.
Today's special guest is Vision Midwife, Liberation Coach, and the founder of Good Wealth Group, Tai Goodwin. Welcome to the show, Tai.
Hey, Michael, I'm so glad to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. So tell us a little bit about what a Vision Midwife does.
So one of my very first clients as a coach said to me, you're able to see people beyond where they are. Right? You help me give birth to a different vision of myself. You're like my vision midwife. And that's how that name stuck. I was able to do some work with her and help her see a different vision for her business, for her life, and then work with her to help her reach that goal, to reach that vision. And so I just assumed that for more clients, let me help you give birth to the next vision of you and the next vision and version of your business.
Interesting. Where did that come from? Where did you start that idea? How did that come about?
You know what? I've always been a teacher at heart. And one of the things I loved about teaching was seeing the light bulb go off for my students, seeing their self-esteem develop, seeing them blossom into new people once they got information. And I kind of take that same approach with coaching. You know, coaching is not just talking to people, it's asking people questions that help them see themselves and see their situations in a different way and allow them to reframe it. And so I've always been able to do that with people. And then be patient and guiding them and helping them to see that for themselves. It's just a natural thing that I've always been really good at doing.
Helping people is awesome. I'm all for helping people, 100%. No, that's good. So as far as the coaching and all that, where does the spirituality fit into that?
Yeah, well, you know what's interesting is about 6 years ago, I started getting this sense of what I called an in-rising. And we were it was in a time where we were watching so many uprisings and, you know, things happening all over the country and all different parts of the world. And what I got a sense of was that there's something happening with people inside, right? Like there's something that we're hungry for. We want something different. What we've been fed from the pulpits and the platforms have not really been helping us move and progress as people and as humans and how we deal with each other and how we deal with our world. And I got this sense that there was something else that was happening with us inside. And so over that time, I started shifting away from marketing, which is where I built a business as a marketer for about 6 or 7 years, had a 6-figure marketing agency. But at the end of last year, I said, you know what? I want to use my superpowers for good. You know, I really want to step into this place and see more people who are visionary
Hmm.
leaders and have these powerful messages and stories, and they're really, really passionate about helping move us forward as a collective group of people,
Hmm.
regardless of dogma, regardless of what belief system, but how can we help each other be better humans? I want to help those people. And
Hmm.
so the work that I do now is a perfect combination of that. Yes, we talk about the visibility piece, but when we talk about that vision is often
Hmm.
connected to what are the spiritual practices, the spiritual modalities, the spiritual side of you. And I want to be clear about this is that my own journey, spent a lot of time in church, spent about 20 years as a diehard Christian, another 20
Hmm.
years deconverting,
Hmm.
deconstructing things. And I'm at a place now where I would consider myself a spiritual atheist. I don't
Hmm.
believe that there is a God per se, but
Hmm.
I do believe that there is something that connects us, but it's just not connected to a God or organized religion or organized church. And as humans, we have a tendency to want to deify
Hmm.
things. And so that's kind of where we end up.
Hmm. We definitely anthropomorphize things for sure. So the spiritual atheist, man, that is amazing. I've never heard that word before. I love it. So how do you get the spiritual part? That's the problem I have. See, I'll do the atheist, I'll do the agnostic part, but
Uh-huh.
when we add that spiritual part, that's where I lose it. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. So can
Yeah.
you make that spiritual side make sense to me?
I'm gonna give it a try.
Yeah.
And this is something that I'm new to understanding too, because I kept trying to figure out, well, what is this, right? Because
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
know with every fiber of my being that the Bible God that I grew up with does not make sense. There's no logic to it, there's no sense to it. The stories
Yeah.
just don't, I get that piece of it. And yet I still can't shake um this sense,
Hmm.
whether it's from nature,
Hmm.
whether it's my own, tapping into my own intuition, which has been more of it, which is why, I'm not one of those people that says, oh, we're all gods. Because again, it goes back to this need to wanting to deify,
Hmm.
something. But I do believe that there's some parts of us as humans that we don't know how we all work, right? There's some
Right.
science that
Yeah.
we haven't figured out yet.
Hmm.
And so are there some maybe intuitive things that I get to tap into? I really do believe that.
Hmm.
Um, when I'm in nature, right? When I am, doing things that are more, I think we call it spiritual, we lump it under spiritual because we don't have the full word for it,
Hmm.
but it is not necessarily connected to something that we've deified and said that we now have to follow.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
that's kind of where I honestly believe that for all of us, this is really about a choose your own adventure kind of thing. Like, so you don't have to, right? You don't have to believe what I believe, but
Hmm.
whatever you decide is for your journey, own it and enjoy
Hmm.
it.
Hmm. Thank you for that. So yeah, no, I love that. Choose your own adventure. That's what life is. Choose your own purpose. Choose your own life. Choose your own. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For the most part, there are restrictions, of course, for people. But so the spiritual part, where does it come from? You mentioned nature. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
But where would it come from? Well, we have our physical part. We have
Yeah.
the natural part. We know these things exist. As far as
Yeah.
the spiritual part, that's a little bit more gray area, I would assume. So
It is a
yeah.
very gray area. And I think, and I can't say 100% I know where it comes from, but I do know, it's the sense that I get when, for example, yesterday morning, my mentor, I'm doing my journal time where I'm writing out and thinking about things to do. And I had this sense of, you know what, I need to send her this message.
Hmm.
Right. And I sent her a message, hey, you got this, whatever, whatever. And I said, I know you know this, right? But sometimes you just need to hear it from someone else. And I sent her that
Hmm.
text message and she was like, thanks. I really needed to hear that this morning.
Hmm.
I don't know where that comes from, right? But I do know that the more I've listened to my own, those little nudges that come
Hmm.
from me, I don't think they come from this deity or anything like that. But I do notice that when I sit down and I pay attention to some of those things,
Hmm.
it connects with someone, right? It
Hmm.
connects with something bigger than me. I don't know how it all works,
Hmm.
but I don't know how it all works. And I am fascinated to discover it. And it
Hmm.
could be that it's totally something I'm making up.
Yeah.
right? But that's the journey that I want to discover it. But I'm not going to make that a God and say now because I've had this experience, everybody else has to have the same kind of experience. And that's where I think we get into that whole thing of trying to make people experience what we've experienced and
Hmm.
then judging people because they don't have the same outcome
Hmm.
that we've had with whatever we decide to believe or experience. And that is actually the opposite of choose your own adventure.
Yeah. For sure. So how do you get how do you decipher between the spiritual and your own train of thought? See, for instance,
Yeah.
if I come up with a thought, an idea randomly, and I sit there and I start to think about it, that
Hmm.
thought's going to progress and those ideas are going to progress. So it's just
Yeah,
natural to me. I
it
don't see a
is.
spirituality in that at all. So how do we get
Yeah.
from natural to spiritual in that instance?
Mhm. And see, I would say that is part of spirituality
Hmm.
for me. I think a lot of times we've been taught that spirituality is so connected to a deity or a God that that's how we see it.
Hmm.
Right. I had somebody the other day that said, well, you can't be spiritual if you don't believe in God. I'm like, I think you can. Like,
You
I
can be
don't
whatever
need
you
to
want.
believe, I don't need to I don't need to believe in a God to want to, connect to sit down and think about my life and sit down and think about and
Hmm.
reflect it. And yes, it is a natural thing. I feel like that natural side of us that does that deep reflection, that, when we take a look at, what our emotions and the patterns and all those pieces, to me, that is a part of how we connect to ourselves
Hmm.
spiritually. And I think a part of that too
Huh.
is because we don't know how all of our brain stuff works, right? We don't know how
Right.
all of that stuff works and how all of that's connected. We don't, we're just starting to, I won't say we're just starting to, but the whole idea of things like epigenetics,
Hmm.
right? Like where, trauma can be passed down through like DNA. We had no idea that that's how things worked.
Hmm.
And now there's conversations about that. Is it right? Is it wrong? We're exploring and we're learning and we're looking, people can look at data. But my thing is, I don't have to, I think we're so caught up sometimes in trying to make a decision based on limited information.
Hmm.
But the honest answer is, nah, none of us really know for
Hmm.
sure.
Wouldn't the trauma in the DNA be natural if we figured that out? That would just be part of the natural process.
I think it can be part of the natural process. Yeah, I think it's a way our bodies responded to something
Hmm.
naturally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that
absolutely.
wouldn't be the supernatural. That would just be a natural process. We figured it
Yeah,
out.
I
We
don't think
know
it's a
now.
supernatural. Yeah,
Gotcha. So
yeah.
what I'm seeing, forgive me, I don't mean to be rude or anything, but what I'm seeing is the I don't knows turn to spirituals.
Hmm.
And what I like to do with the I don't know is keep them as I don't know and not put a
Yeah,
label on it. So
yeah.
it's completely natural. Everything's completely natural till me till I feel it till I can figure it out. You know?
Right.
And because
Yeah.
supernatural is something that is supernatural. It's
Uh-huh.
unnatural. It's not something that we can really experience on a day-to-day basis. So
Right.
how do we get from I don't know to spiritual, and how do we get back to that I don't know?
And I think it is something that we've been conditioned to,
Hmm.
right? And I'm totally, like okay with this as part of the journey,
Hmm.
right? Because the more I dig and the more I start to look at things, I do think a lot of it is I do think there's more I don't know,
Yeah.
but there's something in me that wants to classify it as spiritual because honestly, I think sometimes that feels better. Right. It's a level, I'm just being truthful, right?
Yeah.
Just being
Yeah.
fully transparent. It is what it is, right? We're comfortable using that
Hmm.
term, but it's because we've come from a place where we've been conditioned to say that something has to be spiritual.
Hmm.
And I think as we start to evolve and as we start to learn and grow, just like I was so diehard, oh, Jesus and the cross and all that, right?
Hmm.
And I've evolved, and as I've thought and as I've learned and as I've studied and as I've explored, I am not there anymore. And I'm in this place. 3 years, 4 years, 3 months down the line, I may be in a place where you are to say, oh, we just don't know. And there
Yeah.
is no spiritual side to stuff. And I am totally okay with that being part of the journey without having to adamantly like, because I'm not there. And I would say I'm not there yet.
Hmm. Hmm. Great answer. No, I love that. That's good. Yeah, it's a journey. Absolutely. Everybody's got their own journey. Everybody's going through their own journey and they do it at their own pace. So 100%.
Yeah.
But you did deconvert. You deconverted from Christianity. This I'm actually
I
very
did.
curious about. What
Yeah.
happened? Why did it happen?
Oh my gosh. Man, there's a few pivotal moments.
Hmm.
One of the first pivotal moments was, I remember being in church at the altar yet again, hands raised,
Hmm.
crying, Lord help me, and putting the oil on my head up for prayer one more
Yeah.
time. And I realized, I'm like, you know what, I've been at this for like years. Right. And nothing's changing.
Hmm.
Nothing's moving. I'm doing all the things, right? And I know for people that are listening that are of Christians, they're going to say, well, you're doing things and you're not letting. Listen, when you decide to become a Christian, right? Part of being a Christian means you do Christian things, right?
Hmm.
So that's just part of how groups work. So you go to church, you pray, you read your Bible, you evangelize. Those are the things that you do. And so I was doing all the things.
Hmm.
But nothing was changing in my life. I suffered from a lot of depression, had a
Hmm.
lot of trauma in my background. And for years, Michael, people will say, well, you just blame God and God, you didn't get your way. So no, and the really sad thing is that I never blamed myself. I mean, I
Hmm.
never blamed God, I blamed myself.
Hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, it was like, well, God, you didn't stop certain things from happening because I wasn't right.
Hmm.
Right. Or God, you didn't take away the pain that I felt because I didn't pray hard enough. I didn't fast
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I would pray, literally pray, God, what is it about me that you
Oh,
would stop
yeah.
certain things from happening to other people, but you wouldn't do it for me?
Hmm.
And I remember I had this conversation with my mom, who's diehard Christian. I mean, like my mom is so Christian, she will not watch a movie that's not PG-13. Like she will literally get up and leave the room if they curse more than 5 times in a movie. Like
That's
that's
how I
my
grew
mom,
up. I grew up in a house
right?
just like that. I understand.
Exactly, right. And so I remember saying to her, I said, well, mom, if there's two kids and they're being abused
Hmm.
and they both pray to God
Hmm.
and God stops it in one situation, but he doesn't stop it in the other, why would that be?
What a great question.
And she says, well, God knows what you can bear. Can I
Oof.
curse on your show?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I was like, what the fuck? Like, so if you had two children and both of them were scribbling on a wall,
Hmm.
right? And one of them, you said, oh, honey, don't do it again. And the other one, you beat the hell out of them because that one can bear it.
Hmm.
Who would do that as a parent?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
because then that started me down this thing of, why didn't I deserve to be saved or rescued? Or why what I'm hearing all these stories about God helping everybody find parking spots, right? So you can do
Yeah.
that, but you're not doing this. What is wrong? And so it wasn't about blaming
Hmm.
God, it was what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I was like that for years. And I remember being at that altar and I was like, you know what? No. And then I looked around and I saw a lot of the other women that I had been going to this church with for 5 or 6 years. And every Sunday, Michael, it's the same prayers. God, save my husband. God, help
Hmm.
me with my job. Help me with my car. Help my children. My children are acting up. Help me with my finances. This is every single Sunday.
Yeesh.
And I said, what is wrong? There's something wrong with this picture.
Good job. Good job
I don't
figuring it
want,
out.
right? Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And so my first step was I threw away all of my Bibles. I
Wow.
threw away every Bible. I threw away every Charles Stanley book. Like I had the books, right? Because you got to understand, I had 5 Bibles, Michael. I had like the
Wow.
King James, the NIV, the Chronological, the Amplified Bible, the Thompson Change Reference Concordance. Like, because I was deep into this, right? Studying apologetics and the Hebrew and the Greek. Like I was in.
Man.
And I threw everything away. And here's what my prayer was, because I hadn't given up just yet,
Hmm.
which is why it was a 20-year journey, right? To give it up. I said, my simple prayer was, I want to know you for myself.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
was my prayer. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it looks like, but what I do know is this gospel stuff that I've been believing that came from my mom and whatever I grew with is not working.
Hmm.
But I'm hungry for something to work.
Hmm.
So let's get rid of all the man-made stuff. Let's stop going to the churches where I'm seeing the same things. And my prayer was, I want to know you for myself. And I promise you,
Hmm.
when I got up from that, saying that, that was the first time where I never wondered if I was saved.
Wow.
that whole emotion of, because when you are Christian and they teach you like you're not supposed to sin,
Yeah.
but then when you sin, it's like, oh my gosh, did I backslide? Why am I saved? I got it. And you're in that cycle of, oh my gosh, if I do this, am I saved? Am I still
Yeah.
saved? You're perpetually living under that.
Fear.
And when I made
Absolutely.
that declaration, that prayer, I just want to know you for myself.
Yeah.
I never wondered again.
He didn't show up and say, "Hey, this is me, and now you get to know me." He didn't. Weird. That's weird how that works.
Never wanted again. But of course you were right. No magical thing, no mythical thing happened.
Weird.
But
Yeah.
what it did start opening me up to was, okay, let's really fix what's going on with you.
There you go.
Right? Because there were some things that needed to be healed. And a lot of churches and Christianity stuff, their priority is prosperity. Their priority is all this other stuff, but they never really teach you, hey, you've had some trauma, right? Let's talk about how that trauma shows up in your life.
Yeah.
Let's kind of fix those things. And it was about me taking agency. That was a huge part of it, because you're taught to pray and let's wait on God and God will fix it. And if he doesn't fix it, it's because he's testing you. It's because he's refining you. It's such bullshit.
It's disgusting. Yeah, 100%.
Right? Because if you'd had said, well, okay, this is what happens when you experience trauma. Now let's fix those things.
Yay.
That would have been 20 years of my life that we could have taken back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of, God, what did I do? And how come you aren't? And yeah, so those were the two things. And then there's a funny thing, because I was still trying to hold on to things, Michael, because it was so ingrained in me. At 7 years old is when I kind of said I wanted to be saved and all that kind of stuff, right? So it had been ingrained in me. And I remember I'd started reading Neville Goddard, right? Don't know how I got to find him. But I started thinking about the story of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. Interesting story.
Oh my gosh. And I remember calling my sister. I said, oh my gosh, we have been so bamboozled. Because some of the story, God doesn't want them to build a tower that can reach the heavens.
Yeah. Yeah. Weird.
And I'm like, holy shit, that's not even fucking possible. Right? There is no physical, like, we have spaceships now and can't reach anything.
We can't reach God. It's weird.
It is not fucking possible.
No.
So if that's not possible, and I know it sounds elementary to like a lot of people that probably listen to you, but just think about that. How many of us are so indoctrinated?
Yeah.
That would be like, yeah, that was the story, and that's what. It's not even possible.
No.
Scientifically, it's not. And the thing is, if that was the case, shouldn't he confuse the languages now? Because now we actually have spaceships.
Now we got satellites. We got, what is that? The farthest away satellite taking pictures still? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So why not step in now and confuse our language or do whatever he did back then? Because we're a lot closer now.
Yeah.
And so when I started taking a look at those things, and I said, oh, wait a minute. It's not just like the emotional and the emotional stuff. There's some logic and some science that just makes this not even real.
It's like you set aside the emotional and brought forth your common sense, and then just started thinking from there. And I love that. That's awesome. That's really what you need to do, is look at the Bible and these stories critically. And a lot of people refuse to. And if they do, they get upset. No, this can't be. It's okay. That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, and I know it's scary though, because when you've been taught that if you don't believe this, you are going to go to hell.
Yeah.
If you don't pay these tithes, then you're going to be poor and you're not going to be blessed. If you don't follow and pledge your allegiance to God, then the enemy is going to attack you.
Yeah,
but it's so lukewarm. Interesting. It's the same, but here's what's interesting is the same Christians will say, well, because once you get over that, they'll say, well, God says that you're still going to have trials and tribulations. Then what the fuck am I doing this for? If I'm going to have even more trials and tribulations because I said yes to this cross thing, what did I do this for? It's not making it any better. But that's what they'll tell you when you say, well, God's not a genie, but he told me to ask and pray.
He did. Whatever you want, he says.
Exactly.
But he's not a genie.
Not a genie. So what I mean, it's not that, and I got into a lot of TikTok debates with this whole thing because, because people were coming at me saying, well, you think God is a genie and that's why you left and he didn't do what you want. I said, well, when you're a 7, 8, 9, 10 through 12-year-old praying for the abuse to stop, how is that acting like a genie? That's asking for protection.
From your best friend, supposedly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's asking for safety. And because then the response became, well, God had a plan. And so his ultimate plan is more important than me being safe. Fuck that. Really? That's what you want me to worship?
Preach
I'm
it,
not
Tai.
worshiping that. I'm not doing it. No.
No way.
I couldn't do it anymore. I said, I'm not trying to, the mental gymnastics that I had to go through to make that make sense, right? That his ultimate plan and him wanting to be glorified and needing to be glorified is so much more important than stopping slavery or ending a Holocaust or stopping the wars, or that's the
Showing
kind of
up.
person you want me to worship.
Yeah.
I'm gonna opt out.
Yeah. Man, what a journey. I'm glad you opted out. Holy cow. And you've brought so much common sense to it. And that's what's missing, is just that common sense. I think the Jesus wall blocks a lot of that. It's very difficult to get past that Jesus wall, but you did it. That's awesome.
I did. And to be fair, I think to a lot of people that are mired in it, it really is very psychological.
Yeah.
It really is a lot of brainwashing, to tell you from when you're little, you have to please Jesus. God, you don't want to disappoint God. You're a filthy sinner. Without God, you're nothing without Jesus. You think about when you're just, 7, 8, 3, 4, 5, learning those songs and hearing those stories. I remember one of the stories that was in my family was my mom told me that we had a cousin, Mary, who she prayed that if God brought her son home from the Vietnam War, that she would serve God.
Wow.
And she didn't serve God, and God struck her blind. This was before I was like 7 years old. Like, these are the stories that we're growing up with. So when you hear those kind of stories, or the stories like God took everything away from me because I wasn't willing to be a preacher. I wasn't willing to serve him. And so he stripped me of everything to get my attention so I would serve him. And when we hear that, when we're younger, we're like, oh, wow. But then when you get older, you're like, wait a minute. What kind of abusive situation is that? Like, you're going to, like, you serve a God that creates catastrophe and creates chaos and hurt and harm. So you will serve him. So you will say yes to him.
Yeah.
I want you to be in a relationship with me so much, I'm going to cause all this disaster. So you'll never want to leave me. That is the most toxic relationship ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's disgusting. And if anybody did that in real life, they'd be like, oh, gross, stay away from that person. But then they'll turn around and worship the invisible guy that does that. Yeah.
That's why I talked about breaking up with Jesus, because I said it was like an abusive relationship. It really was. And one of the things that got people really mad is when I said, because God, to me, this is what Bible God says, is that I love you. I love you so much. I will kill for you. I love you so much. But if you ever leave me, you're going to go to hell forever. It's like, wait a minute.
But I love you.
Wait a minute, really? Like, so it's that kind of relationship. Like, if a guy said that, if a woman said that, if anybody said that to you, you would run.
Right. Well, I would hope so anyways.
Yeah, we'd hope so.
We've all been young and dumb before. So thank you for that. That was amazing. No, 100% agree. So what you've done is you've left the church, you've left the religion part of it, but you've held on a little bit to that spiritual part of it. And I think that's kind of the last thing to go for a little bit for me as well. I had it. It went away. The hell thing actually was the longest one for me. That was so hard to get rid of. That was so ingrained into me. Fear of hell. Anyways, so it's kind of a leftover sauce or whatever from the religion. So what is the purpose of the spirituality? What is its purpose?
For me, it's come down to, how do I connect? Right? How do I connect to myself? How do I connect to other people? How do I make sense of all the things that are around me? And that's what I think a lot, like any religious script or text that we had or that people have written.
Yeah.
At its best, it's been man trying to make sense of their world around them with what they knew at the time at its best. At its worst, it's people who are really being manipulative and controlling and wanting to oppress people. Right. So it falls along the line of that sliding scale. And so I think that's, for me, it's like, okay, it's me trying to make sense of, well, how do I tap, like, is this intuition? Like, how do I know? Or, when these thoughts come, what is that? Is it all just me? Or could there be something else that's, and again, it's not a God, because I don't think we have to name it, but is there something that connects all the things together? When you take a look at nature, for example, and you take a look at how species have developed and all the species that we don't know about, it's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Right? But it's not fascinating in a way to me that says, oh, someone must have created this. It's fascinating in a way that says, what sparked all of this? How did all these chemicals and patterns and all these things, like, that's fascinating to me, but I don't think we have to deify it. So it does, again, it goes back to what you're saying. It falls into that I don't know.
Yeah.
And for me, that I don't know piece is still, well, there has to be something. I don't know what it is.
And
right?
we're calling that something spiritual, because
right. I just know it ain't that Bible God. Like, I know that. Sure.
You mentioned tapping into it. Is this something that everybody taps into or has the access to? Because I've tried tapping into all kinds of weird spiritual things and nothing has ever tapped.
You know what? I think a part of it is and I know this is going to sound really probably strange for me to say this, but in all honesty, I think it's all part of what we create in our minds.
Oh,
okay. I think, it's the stories we tell ourselves, right? So if we tell ourselves that we have ESP, right? We start to live and perform, and we start to be that way. I think one of the most powerful things that we have as humans is the ability to create stories.
Yes. Well, we also think it's very awesome.
Yeah. Whether they're real or not.
Yes.
And it's fascinating that we have this ability to create these stories, and then we have the ability to actually to start living some of those stories out.
Correct. Yes.
And I don't know how that all works, but I find it fascinating. And I think that that's part of it, right? I think there's some of us that we have this belief system, which is why churches and those kind of things can exist, because we can tell ourselves, oh, this must be God. Oh, this must be that. Right. And I've said this to somebody before. I said, if all you know is Jesus, everything is the Holy Spirit and God. If you grew up Buddhist, if you grew up Islamic, everything is Allah. Right. And so we have there's something in us, and however our makeup is, that allows us to create these stories, and then we can live as if those things are true.
Apply them, yes.
But we can also unlearn stuff. And I think that is part of how we evolve and how we grow.
Yeah, I had something written here that goes perfectly with that, and I've lost it. It's essentially to the lines of or the think it, write it, read it, believe it, and then be it. Essentially, that's what we can do. Like, if I wanted to, like right now, I'm in a position in work that I get that imposter syndrome for sure. I definitely feel imposter syndrome sometimes, but I am it. I did it. I wrote it. I believed it, and I went for it, and I did it. And I think that's a lot of what we do in our life. Is I can change from this career to another career. I could be that person instead. And that's the ability of our brains, I see, and our willpower and all that stuff. But that's the I don't know. I don't see the spiritual part in that. It's just the physical. But yeah, 100%. We can think it, be it, and change for sure. I love that.
Yeah. And I guess this another spiritual question, I have is like, where does that drive come from? Right. So where, like, you were able to make those decisions and have that journey and think it, write it, be it, become it.
Yeah.
Some people does everybody have that? And if they don't have, like, where does that come from? Like you asked me, can anybody tap into that, right? And when you see people that aren't able or haven't been able to tap into that, why is that? Again, I don't have answers, but those are questions that I ask. Like, why
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Could it be circumstantial as well? Like for me in my position, I live
Hmm.
in America. I have a little bit more privileges than some people. When we go third world countries, somebody couldn't do that. I could believe it. I'm going to be this and this, but they are stuck in the society that they're in. They're stuck with the limitations that they have within that society as well. So I don't
Yeah.
think it would work for everybody. I think it just depends on the situation and the circumstances as well. I could write
Mhm.
down I want to be Spider-Man all my life, but it's just still not going to happen. I can wear the suit and be silly, but I mean,
Right.
nothing's gonna, no spider webs or nothing coming out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there are beliefs that say that you get to choose what you're going to experience when you come into this earth,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
And that, so again, our minds are fascinating with what we can use to explain how things work.
indeed.
Right. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of it does fall into, well, we don't know. And so, and for me, I'm all about, well, let's explore the possibilities.
yeah, yeah.
Right? We don't know. And I think a lot of people are very scared or afraid to not have a definite answer. And I
Yeah.
think once you become comfortable with being able to say, I don't have to have all the answers,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the probably one of the first steps to getting what I call liberated, is to say, I don't have to know all the answers. I
Yeah.
don't have to always have the control over every single thing. I can be in this place of exploration and it be okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't knows are my favorite answers because we don't know answers to a lot of these questions. Awesome. Awesome. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from the spirituality? What's the next step? Is there when we die, do we go somewhere? Does our spirits go somewhere? How does that
Yeah.
work for you?
I think those are still questions that I don't know the
Mm.
answers to. Um, I like certain answers more than I like
Yeah.
others, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know if we have those answers. I don't think there's a hell. I know they said that was one of
Mm.
the things. Like I don't think that's a thing. Um, it would be great if there was something where you kind of got to come back and be something else or evolve as something else, or there was something. And it's also fine too if what, once you end here, you end here.
Yeah.
I think it's arrogant a little to assume that we need to have this immortality, right?
A lot. It's a lot. Arrogant.
Yeah. I mean, animals, we're animals, for a
Yeah.
lack of better understanding of how biology works, right?
Hmm.
And when a cat dies, the cat doesn't be like, well, I want to, I need to come back, and it's an
That's a dog.
animal, right? Yeah. And I think we've kind of gotten this privilege of thinking that we're owed immortality. And so
Hmm.
there has to be something after this. And it could very well be that there is nothing.
Absolutely.
So why
Yeah.
not make the most of how we live now, how we treat each other now?
There it
Why
is.
not spend our time on that?
Mm.
Because one of the things that I realized in my journey, because and this is something that we were churched into, right? In church, and especially for a lot of women, you're taught that your purpose is always tied to serving other people.
Yeah.
And I remember this epiphany about 4 years now. I was at an event in San Diego, which is my favorite place of all times right now. And I was at this event and I realized that my only purpose is to become the best version of myself. That's
There you
it.
go.
And if I'm doing the work to do the healing, to take care of myself, to love myself, it's going to overflow into everybody that I'm in contact with. Because then I'm
Love
not
it.
going to be this angry, resentful person. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? I'm going to have a heart and want to help other people. I'm not going to want to see other people suffer. I'm going to want to make intention for being kind and being loving to other people, but that's only as much as I am kind and loving to myself.
Mm.
And we've had so many people, especially pastors and leaders, who, because they've made their quote unquote purpose to serve other people and they've never done anything to heal themselves,
Mm.
instead of them actually helping, they actually end up hurting more people because they never fixed any of the brokenness in themselves. And so we
Mm.
see church leader after church
Mm.
leader after church leader with the same things over and over and over again. And if we
Hmm.
could just get those folks to stop for a minute and stop, I have to serve these other people. How about you fix you? right? How
Yep.
about you heal yourself? Because if you're whole, then you're not going to start abusing other people in the church. You're not going to be so greedy.
Mhm.
You're not going to want to extort, people and, just really manipulate people if you're whole yourself. So how about you fix that
Mm.
first?
Yeah. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first.
There
Yeah.
we go.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. I'll
Yeah.
write that one down right there. All right. Thank you so much. This has been a blast. Where can we find you at? And any closing comments, of course.
Yeah, well, if you're taking a look for me on social media, I am Tai Goodwin. That's my name, and I have a website, taigoodwin.com, where you can find me there with readings and writings and all that kind of good stuff. And I actually have a podcast called it was called Liberated CEO, but we're rebranding that. And so now it's Girlfriend Get Free. I am 100% on board with helping people find their own liberation, and whatever that is for them. I really want people to just choose their own adventure.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Ty. This has been a blast. We'll stay in touch. Stay safe out there. That's all the show there is for you today. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find all things BSW related on the show's website at thebiblesayswhat.com. If you like what you heard and want to help keep the recording light on, simply go to thebiblesayswhat.com and sign up to be a supporter of the show. Your episodic tithes of $1 or more will get you early access to each new episode on Wednesdays instead of Sundays. And no matter which platform you use to listen to your podcasts, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next episode. Until then, would you kindly share and review the show? Next time on The Bible Says What? I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see.